Hey, what's going on, everyone? I have another conversation I want to share with everyone today. This is a conversation with the great Tuffy Stone, who is an absolute legend in the barbecue world. Tuffy's from Virginia. He's a barbecue pitmaster, and he's kind of iconic in the pitmaster world. He's won all kinds of competitions, has all sorts of accolades. He's written books. He's the host of Barbecue Pitmasters on TV, co-host I should say, and he just has tons of insight into the world of grilling and smoked meats. And like with summer around the corner, it was a good time to have this conversation. He also has some really good insight, I think, for beginners, people that just got a smoker, or maybe they got a brand new grill, with all kinds of bells and whistles to it, and he gives some pretty good insight on how to get started in our talk. It's a pretty long conversation. It's about 30 minutes. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you get something out of it. I personally think it's really fascinating to hear him talk about how people overdo it with smoke, and also how to achieve kind of the perfect tenderness when it comes to smoked meats. So enjoy. Thanks for tuning in, and hit the subscribe button if you like what I'm doing here. I'd love to learn more about the partnership with Flaviar, and the box and everything else like that. I think that's a good place to start. And then I have a bunch of questions that I want to ask you about your expertise here.
All right. Well, when it comes to cooking and grilling and barbecuing, I can get a little windy, so just cut me off if you need to.
I love it. So tell me a little bit about the box you're doing with with the whiskey and everything like that. I'd love to hear how you kind of have curated it and any kind of personal touches. I think that's a good starting place for us.
Well, it's like so many of my other friends that have this deep love for outdoor grilling and smoking and barbecue. A lot of us are very fond of spirits. I tend to really enjoy whiskeys and bourbons, and so when we started when Flaviar and I started talking about potentially doing this box, it was like it was hitting two of my passions. It was getting people to cook in the backyard and then do this collection of these curated spirits. I love what they do with these boxes so much. It's such a nice way to try different whiskeys, different spirits without having to commit to a whole bottle of it. And they just I don't know, when we were working on the box and I don't know. It's just, for me, the kind of cooking, I'm a little different in the barbecue world because I started off kind of like in a French kitchen when I was going to college. And so whether it was beer or wine or spirits and how they related to whatever the food was you were having, it's just something that we always tried to think about when we were, I've been in the restaurant business for a long time, and so it was always part of it. But it's interesting. I don't know. I can get windy on whiskey, I think, too, because this all the nuances, these flavors that come from years and years in the barrel, and it could be smoke, it could be cherry, it could be coffee, vanilla, but all these nuanced flavors, and then that whole process of making whiskey, to me, I get really kind of,
it's super fascinating.
I mean, there's a term in French cooking called à la minute, which is you cook to order. It's really fast. It'd be something that's like sauteed, or I got into barbecue to reconnect as a cook, to reconnect as a chef. I can make all these hard to pronounce, fancy, expensive foods, and I got a barbecue pit just as a new culinary way to connect, creatively and as a cook. And barbecue's not a la minute. It takes, depending on what temperature you're cooking at, you could cook brisket for 18 hours or longer. Well, these whiskeys and these bourbons and these spirits, I mean, it's, that's a commitment of time too. I mean, that's, beer we're making fast. But these spirit, I don't know. So when I started talking to Flaviar about this whole idea, I got excited on a bunch of different levels. But I like the way that they put these collections together, and how they portion them, and it's just, I don't know. It's a fun way to like get delivered to your doorstep, or whether you got to go in and pick it up. I don't know. It's just a cool way to like try a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a cool way to explore a very big world. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of the whiskey world's like the barbecue world, like that. Like there's a lot of nuances.
Well, it's like, so I used to say I like cheap beer and good wine, and then when I opened my first barbecue place, I started doing these. I started tasting all these beers. Trying to, figure out what beer I was going to put in the restaurant. And I started trying these hoppier beers, and I realized that there was more to life than inexpensive beer. And there was this anyways, I fell in love with all these really great beers. But what I don't like about, sometimes you buy a 4-pack of beer that costs, $14 to $18, and I hate it when I pop the can on one, and I hate it. So now I got three beers that I'm going to gift to somebody else because I don't like it, because it's not what I'm enjoying. So these little bottles, these curated boxes, it's a really nice way to sample some stuff without having to commit to a bottle.
Yeah. I agree. So I'm kind of curious. I'd love to kind of angle some of your expertise around kind of the kickoff. I mean, I know for you it's always barbecue season, but I feel like as we, position into like this time of year, the backyard grills start firing up, and here it's the perfect time for the amateur to want to like figure out how to fine tune their their at home game. I'm kind of curious, like, what are some of the mistakes that you think that people make? Like,
oh man, it's so I like to, Brandon, I like to teach a lot. I like people to get, I don't care if you cook indoors or outdoors, to be honest with you. I like people to cook, I think, and I like to help people get better at it. So I'm in my house right now, and I can point right across the street to my neighbor's house, Sue Brown, and I've been in this house now for over 20 years, and so Miss Brown, when I first got into barbecue, I would go and I'd knock on her door and I'd say, hey, Miss Brown, I got some barbecue for you. And she'd be so grateful, and she'd take that barbecue and she'd thank me. And I did that, for a long time because, I was just talking to Joe before we got on with you, and he said, he loves to cook like a pork butt, for example. And so a pork butt, that can be 8 hours of time or whatever. And that's what I started off. I'm from Virginia, so when, you order a barbecue sandwich here, we know that you mean pork.
Yep.
But I would make all this pork, and I'd take it over to Miss Brown, and she would be so grateful. And one day I knocked on Miss Brown's door, and she answered, and she said, I said, hey, Miss Brown, I got some barbecue for you. And she looked at me, and she said, Tuffy, I still got some of the last barbecue you gave me. And I realized at that moment, she didn't want it. So why did she not want it? Well, it goes to answering your question in a very windy way. I think most of us, myself included, when we first make barbecue for the first time and we get that smoker, and we set it up, and that smoke's coming out of the stack, and you're like, yeah, I'm smoking. I read a book that really inspired me. A guy named John Willingham wrote this book, and in this book, he said, smoke is dirt. He said, we're cooking, we're not smoking. So I think one of the first mistakes that we all make when we're learning how to make barbecue is we over smoke stuff. And so I've been doing this for a long time now, and I've thought about it a lot. But I like to treat smoke like salt and pepper. So whether it's ribs or fish or chicken or brisket or whatever it is, I want you to taste that meat first. And then I want the smoke to be a complementary backdrop flavor to whatever it is that we're making. And so the bigger the cut of meat, the more smoke that I put on there. The lighter or the thinner the cut of meat, less smoke. So so over smoking is probably one of the big mistakes that we made. And then so if there's two guiding lights for me that if I was to say, all right, you got two things you can say about barbecue to help people make better barbecue, what are they? I'd say we treat smoke like salt and pepper. And then the other guiding light for me is tenderness. The best foods in the world are going to have the best mouthfeel. And I don't care if it's Caesar salad, ice cream, or barbecue. So how does Caesar salad get into this conversation? Well, the best Caesar salad, in my opinion, is the one that's got crisp romaine, the right amount of dressing, not too much, not too little. The croutons are fresh and crispy and crunchy. And, that cheese is grated just right. Ice cream, the smoothest, silkiest mouthfeel. And barbecue's the same way. They talk about everybody likes a rib that's fallen off the bone. Well, the reason we say that is no one likes tough barbecue. No one wants undercooked barbecue. Most barbecue is historically taken these tough cuts of meat, these tough cuts of meat, these lesser cuts of meat, and trying to coax something great out of them. And so we don't like a chewy rib, but when you really get good at making a good rib, you get this sweet spot where it's a nice gentle chew. The meat comes cleanly from the bone where you bite it, but the rest stays on there. And so I think texture and the right amount of smoke are probably, the first time I would probably say most people that cook their first brisket, their big issue they probably failed on is they probably undercooked it because we cook this brisket for hours and hours and hours, and your spouse is pissed because dinner's late and the kids are crying, and you think surely this thing's got to be ready by now, and then I could get windy on the brisket. I'm not, but anyways, I think a lot of times we undercook our first brisket, or we so focus on texture, tenderness, doneness. Try and get the right smoke on there. Run clean smoke. I mean, all these joints in Texas that are like, barbecue's gotten so popular, and COVID really made it popular because no one was going out to eat. Everybody was cooking in their backyard. But smoke is a good flavor used in the right way. And I think I coined this phrase, stereotypical expected flavors of barbecue. And so what is that? Well, smoke is one of those flavors, man. And anyways, I'm getting windy. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. I love it. I mean, look, I think that's, you have just such a very simple way of like putting it. Like, think about smoke like you do seasoning. You don't like to over-season. Like, your over-seasoned food tastes like trash.
Right. Well, if I put it into simple terms for myself, I can remember it, and I've been fortunate. I get to teach a lot of people now, and I just try and put it in terms that are hopefully easy to understand, and we can remember.
What do you advise? Like, I'm kind of thinking about this, like from the perspective of, someone who's kind of clueless, but they just spent, $3,000 on a Traeger or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, what do you advise? Go ahead.
No, I mean, like I was talking to Joe, so Joe's got a pellet cooker, and one of the things that, all right, first of all, I think get whatever grill you can afford. People ask me all the time, what grill should I get? Well, what do you want to cook? How much of it do you want to cook? Do you live in an apartment in the city? Do you have a backyard? There's a lot of questions I have to ask before. But for me, when I'm picking, let's talk about tool selection. Let's talk about grill selection. I want a grill that I can do low and slow, and I can grill on. So if I can only have one grill, I want to be able to cook a pork butt on it. I want to be able to cook a hamburger on it. I want to be able to cook a steak on it. And so whether, and I don't get persnickety. I mean, I love playing with fire, but if you don't have time or any interest in playing with fire, you want a gas grill, you want a pellet grill, I don't care. Some of these nuances, some of these steps that we're going to get into, they're going to stay the same. The seasoning, the rub, the sauce, the doneness, all these kind of things are going to stay the same. But I think it's important that when you're picking a grill, that if you want to cook ribs and you want to cook hamburgers, it needs to be a tool that does that effectively. So a kettle grill is a very affordable way to get both. They're not expensive. They're lightweight. You know, you can put it in the back of your car and take it to the beach if you wanted to. But we can do what's called two-zone cooking. We can have a hot side and a cool side. So we can have coals over here, no coals here, and we can cook, ribs that way. We can cook, but anyways, I think that's really important. If I was talking to somebody right now, like, man, I have never cooked a rack of ribs. What do I need to do? I got this interest. So I'd say, all right, so let's get our grill. Let's get our fuel.
Yep.
Let's get our meat. I always say get the best meat you can afford. Look for, when it comes to barbecue meats like ribs and butts and brisket, I want marbled meat because those meats are going to take hours to cook. So look for striations of fat in there, but get good meat. And I could get windy on that too, but I'm not. And then let's talk about the seasoning now. So in these boxes, we got 3 of my products in there. So we've got, my classic barbecue rub, which is going to be very typical of what you might find in Tennessee or Kansas City. It's going to have some salt, some sugar, some spices, but it's going to be a very likable rub. And then I've got another rub in there. It's called my Everything Seasoning, and there's no sugar in that one. It's very salt forward. It's very savory. And then I got a sauce in there, but also it's coming with the book. So the book, I make barbecue products, and I hope that people buy them and like them. But I like to teach too. So I got so many recipes in there and techniques and things to help guide somebody to. Some people, man, they don't want to buy a rub; they want to make a rub.
Yeah.
But so let's figure out what we're going to season the meat with. So simple terms again: the bigger the cut, the more rub I put on there. The bigger the cut, the longer I let that rub sit on there. The thinner the cut, less rub and less time. Why? Because most barbecue rubs are going to have salt in them. And if we keep it on there too long, that salt can actually cure the meat itself. So we could take ribs and we could turn them into ham if we wanted to. So, but anyways, and fresh. It's like, man, if we're going to babysit a rack of ribs for 4 hours, let's put really tasty, bright, fresh ingredients on there. So, shake that rub up before you, actually, I got one right here. Shake that rub up before you use it because those heavier ingredients will settle down, so shake it up, keep them in a cool, dark place. But if we're going to cook a butt or a rack of ribs or a brisket, let's put really tasty ingredients on there.
What about how you would advise people to approach, your fuel and wood around flavor? I think it's, I have to imagine that's a place where sometimes people can overdo it, maybe not foresee how to properly match for the right either protein, or, the right whatever they're doing.
So pellet cookers. So one of the things that's good about pellet cookers, they're very clean smoke.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
In fact, sometimes people will come up with tips and tricks and hacks to get more smoke on a pellet smoker because they run so clean that sometimes it might just be a faint wisp of smoke. Gas grills, there's not going to be any smoke there unless we use smoke boxes and chips and things like that. But when we get, and so I cook mostly on charcoal grills and big stick burners. When I'm cooking if you're cooking with all wood, we want that fire to run clean. So we want to have airflow. A fire that doesn't have oxygen is going to create creosote, and that's going to be a very bitter, off-putting flavor. So I tend to run the smallest fire that I can to get my pit to the cooking temperature that I want. And I use little teeny pieces of hickory, and I cut it down really small, and I feed that as needed. It's a more laborious way of making running a fire, but it's a very clean way. And Brandon, I got hickory. I thought I was going to cook with applewood, because I'm in Virginia. We got a lot of apple, orchards here, but I couldn't get it all the time. So if we really look at barbecue historically, it's the woods that are closest by you that you tend to use, because it's a lot of work, man. Yeah. Cutting that wood up. So I could get hickory all the time. Some people would say hickory's a more assertive, powerful, flavored type of cooking wood, but not the way I run a fire. I let that fire breathe. I think we need if you're going to cook with all wood, you don't want that wood too green, because it's going to be too hard to manage the fire. Now, if we were doing a burn barrel, we were doing it old school, and we were burning that wood down to coals, then green wood can be really good, because we can get a big raging fire, and then that moisture pops into coals, and then we can shovel it and do all that. And then I would say, everybody, for your cooking wood, keep it in a dry environment. Put a tarp on it. If you got a garage or somewhere you can store it, that's great. Charcoal. All right, so charcoal is really important too. So there are some charcoals out there that have better quality and better taste than others. And I'm not going to speak brands, but actually there's a website out there. I think it's called, I haven't been to it in years, but I think it's called I think it's the Natural Whiz or something like that. But anyways, this guy did this, he did this study on all these different fuels. And he played around with flavor. He played around with burn times, ash, all of that. But I would just say, to me, everything's important. When I have sharp knives, clean pit, good wood, good meat, fresh shrubs, good sauce, all those kind of things. Again, it's an investment of time. I mean, everybody out there we know is probably busy. It's all we can do to get our list of things done today that we need to get done. And so when we, especially long cook items, ribs, pork butts, brisket, things like that, they're going to take hours and hours and hours. So let's just start, get your grate clean, get good fuel, fresh rub, pour yourself a drink.
A little whiskey.
But fuel is now, and I know you know about this, but the Texas crutch can really benefit if somebody's making barbecue for the first time. The Texas crutch can be a really nice technique to help control and manage that smoke level. So for anybody out there that doesn't know what the Texas crutch is, it's like we cook this rack of ribs or this pork butt or this brisket till it's got just the right amount of smoke, beautiful color, but it's not tender. Then we wrap that whole thing in either parchment, butcher paper, or aluminum foil, and we put it back on the cooker, and we cook it until it's the tenderness that we were looking for. But what that's going to do is keep the smoke off, keep the moisture in, and we can really get an elevated product, by wrapping that meat when it's got just the right amount of smoke. So
that kind of lends me to another a follow-up question on that. And this is one of my last questions here too. We when it comes to sauce, I feel like there are many ways to experiment while you're cooking and perfecting it and kind of making it your own. I think that experimentation usually starts for a lot of people with sauce. Just because, it's easy, easy-ish. Do you have any, I know you have a ton of recipes on this, and there's a sauce for every style you go under the sun. But I would just love to hear, if you have any kind of, secret, hacks that like kind of take things to the next level for, anything from a basic sauce to like something a little next level?
So, just a few things. First of all, again, and I teach this all the time, but I would say everybody, let's sauce at the end. And so what I mean by that, it's let's cook the meat to the doneness that we want it to be before we sauce it. I'm guessing there's a lot of people out there who can relate to having had barbecue chicken one time where the sauce had burned on the outside and the chicken was raw on the inside. A lot of your barbecue sauces will have sugars in them. And if they get too hot on the grill, they'll burn and it'll be very bitter. And so what we want to do is we want to get that internal doneness of whatever meat it is we're cooking to where it's done. And then we're going to sauce at the end. And when we put it back on the smoker or the grill, we want to be careful. We want to set the sauce just barely, but we don't want to burn that sauce. So I would say, generally speaking, just always remember to sauce at the end. So just some things of not being too long, but just, and this is all geared more towards grilling and barbecuing.
Yeah.
I could get into hollandaise and all this other stuff, but we're not doing that.
Your classical sauces.
I like to bring spirits, and whiskeys and bourbons into sauces sometimes, and that can just give it a little pop. Just some really interesting nuance. But when I do that, I will kind of get my sauce like where I want it, and then I'll come in with bourbon or whiskey, and I'll almost treat it like a splash of vinegar, so I can kind of do it to taste and get it, and then that's another thing too. Who are we feeding? Because it might be, you and I might love bourbon and whiskey, but some people might not like it as much as I do. So I try to put it in there to where it's not too overwhelming. Sometimes I'll actually burn off the alcohol, and just get the flavors. But so if you ever want to bring in whiskeys or bourbons or things like that, almost treat it like vanilla extract or something like that. And it's just going to give it a really interesting pop. A sauce that I wasn't that familiar with until I was writing my cookbook that I felt in love with is a white barbecue sauce. And I ended up putting 3 recipes in the book because I fell in love with it so much. So for anybody that's not familiar with a white barbecue sauce, it's a mayonnaise-based barbecue sauce. They tend to be very popular in Alabama. I got a good friend, Chris Lilly, and they got a restaurant called Big Bob Gibson's. It's been around for probably close to 100 years now. And anyways, white barbecue sauces are amazing. And I had a guy come in one time to the restaurant, and he ordered a dozen wings, and I was taking the order. I said, "You want white sauce or red sauce?" And he said, "What's white sauce?" And as soon as I said the word mayonnaise, he said, "Oh, no, I don't want any mayonnaise." So I went and made his wings. I brought them out, and I said, "There's 13 wings in that box." I said, "There's 12 red sauce, and there's 1 white sauce, and I want you to try it." And the next time he came in and he ordered wings, and he ordered white sauce on the wings. So what I like about white sauce is, especially when we get into smoked meats, they can be a little rich sometimes, and you got the seasoning, you got all this smoke and everything. And the white mayonnaise-based barbecue sauces are tangy, and they're fresh and they're vibrant, and they just give it a little bit of pop. So they're great on things like pork and wings, and I just love them. I would say when you're making sauces, so if you want to experiment, you want to make your own sauce. One thing's really great about sauces is we can adjust. If it got too flavorful, we can hit it with a little water, and if it wasn't flavorful enough, we can reduce it down. And so we can sit there and tweak that sauce, until it's just the way that we want it. So, and I don't try and be too heavy with sauce. I want the meat to be the star. I want the sauce to be a supporting pop of flavor to it. Sometimes I'll put the sauce on the side. If we go down to these Texas barbecue joints, a lot of times there'll be no sauce, and sometimes the sauce, it'll generally always be on the side. They want you to taste that beautiful beef rib or,
Yep.
or whatever it is, straight up.
Awesome. Tuffy, this was awesome. It's so great to meet you, man.
So nice to meet you,
I
too.
could talk to you all day long. But unfortunately, I have a pizza tasting that I'm going to tonight. So I'm going from
Oh,
talking
dog.
barbecue to a pizza thing. But it's really great to meet you, man. And, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Brandon, and I appreciate your time. I hope that pizza's good, and hope you enjoy those spirits that you got nearby.
I shall. Happy hour will be here soon.